Hello friends, how you doing? Day 1573, hope you're doing amazing on this Sunday night. As many of you know, I am currently taking a course on what is grief and how to work through it. It's actually today's the last class for lesson, so I just want to come and share with you one thing that I found really fascinating. It's just what trauma is, okay? And so a definition that was shared was, trauma is when we are wounded and that wound persists and has a negative impact on our lives well after the event. Okay? So essentially it lives in us. An actual quote from Gabor Mate, he's an expert in the field of trauma? Actually, I'm not really sure. But he knows his stuff. His quote is, trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. Again, I'll repeat it. Trauma is not what happens to you. So it's not the event. Trauma is what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. In other words, it's our perception of what happened. Okay? And if you think about it, as a child or baby, we don't really have the skills or maturity to understand what's happening sometimes. And so if we hold that story throughout our lives, that can really, really affect us in a very negative way in our adulthood. And so we all have what we call baggage, okay? Essentially, that's what trauma is, baggage, right? We're holding on to something that is as a result of what happened when we were younger. And so he actually goes on to actually share what happened to him. And so as a child, he was actually not abandoned, but he was given away as a baby, okay? So as a baby, if you are no longer with your primary caregiver, what can you assume that's happened to you, right? What can it mean to a little baby? Like, he was less than a year old. And so a baby, they can only assume they were abandoned, that they're not lovable, they're not enough. It could be a number of things, right? And so, but was that the truth? And so he shares his story. So this is in Hungary during World War II. Okay, and the Nazis had taken over the country. He's a Jewish boy that was crying in his crib. And so no matter what his mom did, he kept crying. And at the time, all the Jewish babies were crying because obviously the Nazis were killing everyone, all the Jews. And so as a baby, he wasn't really consciously aware of what was happening, but obviously he could feel all the negative energy from his mom, from everyone around him. And so he couldn't stop crying. And so he was actually given to a stranger. And the stranger was actually risking their own life to take in this little baby. And so here's a mother giving up their baby. And this was an act of love. And the person receiving him was actually an act of love as well. So they're both huge acts of love. Both are risking their lives. And so when he started to actually understand what actually happened as an adult, obviously through counseling, therapy, what have you, he was actually able to reframe the story, the meaning that he gave as a baby. And again, this is all unconscious. And so he was finally able to understand that what happened was actually an act of love. And then he wasn't abandoned. But of course, as a baby, he didn't understand that. And so I share that story with you because what emotional baggage are you carrying around with you? What trauma are you holding in your body? Because to go through life with a lot of baggage, it's going to weigh on you, heavy. One of the things you have to do is forgive. Forgive who? Yourself? Potentially somebody else that was in the picture? Who knows, right? We all go through different things. But that's one of the steps, right? Because what trauma does is it's embedded in our nervous system. And so when certain things happen in our lives, we get triggered. And if we don't explore and get curious as to what happened in our childhood, then we're going to get triggered. We're going to do and say things that may not be what you actually want to do and say. Sorry, my throat's killing me, my allergies. But yeah, I just found that very, very, very powerful, that story that he shared, because again, we all have an old story that actually keeps us attached to our our trauma. How do you get through that? You have to attach a new story. And for him, he was actually loved as a child. And in order to save his own life, his mother actually had to give him away to a stranger. So it was a natural act of love. And so when he has these triggers again, he can now instead of saying or acting out on this trigger, he can actually ask himself, why do I feel this way? And the more he practices it, the better he'll be able to actually handle that emotion that comes up. Okay? But yeah, there's so much. Oh my gosh, this course, wow. Lots of obviously deep stuff, but it's actually really important, I think, for anybody to understand what grief truly is, and how it gets stored in our body, and how to actually work through it, how to actually move forward in our lives so that it actually no longer holds us back. And so, maybe in the future I'll share a few lives on just different snippets of it, but this was one I found really, really eye-opening to me. Just to understand what trauma is. Because again, there's perception, which is internal, what we view, we make of the situation. And then there's actual reality, what the actual situation is. And sometimes our perception is our reality, but that may not be the reality. We need to dig into the details a little bit more to actually understand more context. But my throat's going, so I'm just going to leave it there. I love you all. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Okay, bye.